What's up, everybody? I'm Thomas J. Bellezza, and welcome to another episode on the right mindset. Today, we are going to go over, as the thing says, mastering world building. Basically, crafting immersive fictional realities. Because whether you're a budding writer looking to sharpen your skills or an experienced author seeking fresh insights, this lesson is ultimately going to explore the art of creating fictional worlds that captivate your readers and elevate your storytelling. Um, yeah, so let's try this. Let's see what happens. Hit that intro and let's start the game. Boom, 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 boom. Real quick before we get started, if you're new here or you've been watching for quite some time and you just haven't done so, please subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon. Some really interesting updating news. Today is 10/14/2023. When I record this, of course, it won't be posted on that day. I record in batches. But I am 44 subscribers away from 1,000. So that's pretty exciting. Hopefully, by the time this video comes out, I'll be at 1,000, and I'm so grateful and appreciative of all the support. But let's get right into it. I know you came here for some world building. The essence of world building is a fundamental aspect of storytelling that can elevate your narrative to new heights. So we're basically going to explore the core objectives and significances of world building in the creative process. First and foremost, defining world building. We have to know what world building is, and I'm sure you've heard it a million times, but just in case some of those new baby writers or baby authors or writers just getting into the groove of thing don't know, let's define it. Because as wordsmiths, the definition of words matter, even if they change. All right. World building is the art of constructing a fictional world within the context of your narrative. It encompasses the creation of settings, cultures, societies, and environments that serve as the backdrop for your characters and plot. But it goes beyond mere descriptions. It's about bringing these elements to life, making them vivid and immersive for your readers. Ultimately, you want your world building to literally build a world that feels lived in. That's your goal. So now I really think we should try to understand the purpose of world building, which is primarily to enhance the storytelling experience for your audience. It's about transporting readers into a different realm, allowing them to explore, experience, and engage with your fictional universe. Effective world building is a powerful tool for creating memorable and emotionally resonant narratives. Resonant. Uh, the purpose of world building in a nutshell, just, despite what I just read off my script, is that ultimately, if your characters are just in conversation floating in what's known as the white room, uh, it doesn't allow the audience to feel the emotional connection to their surroundings. And the truth is, if you and I were having a conversation, it's one thing. But if you and I were having a conversation in a room, now the stakes are raised, even though they are not necessarily high stakes. But now you and me in a cell, the stakes are even higher. You and me on an abandoned boat in the middle of the ocean after the storm had destroyed and killed the crew except for you and me. That's a completely different story. Even if the conversation is the same and we're talking about our family, if one of our characters is like, I just I miss my kids and my my partner, my wife and everything. And then maybe your character is like, You're so lucky to even have that experience in your life. That response back and forth in any one of those situations has escalated stakes. If we're just in a room, we're just two people talking about our family. Uh, Mostly my character's talking about missing their family, and then the character that you would represent would be like a little like, oh man, it's I don't have one, but I'm glad you have that experience. Now us in a cell, oh, now we're connecting backstory to and connecting to one another. Is this my cellmate? Whatever the case may be. But if we're on a boat in the middle of nowhere and we're on a shipwrecked boat that's floating and we just finished a storm, that the substance of, and I really miss my wife and my kids and my partner, my wife, and I just want to see her. And that, man, it's so. I'm glad you have that experience, though. So that's how powerful setting is. But world building is how that setting looks. World building is the environment around that. So, the house alone as a setting, what's in that house? What do these people look like? How are they conducting themselves? The same thing as with a cell. Is it a regular prison cell? Like a traditional one of our age? Is it in a cave? Is it in a ship? Is it in a spaceship? What is the system? Are they bars or are they lasers? Right? These little elements create world building. uh, I'm not necessarily talking about setting, like you got to set the room and everything. What I'm saying is every space, every area you are, and the more you build around that white room into something of substance, because your world exists, and then the way it looks, the way it's interacted with, adds so much value to the subtext, context, and the stakes of the conversation. Sometimes the stakes aren't high, but my example, as I showed you, a white room, I miss my parent and my wife and my kids, is different in a white room, in a room, in a cell, on a boat. All right. Now, the importance of understanding why world building is essential is that the craft of captivating a world is where authors must have a deep understanding of what they're trying to accomplish with their world building. This involves clarifying the role of your world building within their story and how it contributes to the overall narrative. It's not just about adding details for the sake of complexity. It's about using those details to serve your creative vision. Again, you know, uh, the way I like to add world building is through the character's experience. Sometimes we don't have to know that there are mountains far off in the distance. But if there's mountains and then plains, and a character, I've used this example before, is on a horse, them experiencing the mountains and what they look like on the backdrop far off in the distance is different for them because it's a choice, right? But if it's just the author going, there are mountains in the distance and there are plains over here, and this is what it looks like, it's not as interesting. It's not as immersive because you want the characters to experience. Now, by the way, if you have more than one character could be dreaming off about, like, I wish we were going to the plains, while the other character is like, the mountains are for me, like whatever the case may be. They don't have to have dialogue per se, but their behavior to recognize the environment is important. But another thing is, like, if they're looking off at the mountains, the kind of birds or animals that exist in the air, what is in the air, how do the clouds look? How does your sun look upon the canvas of life? Does your world, if it's not a part of Earth, what color is your sun? Do you have 2, 3, 4, or 5 suns? Whatever the case may be, what do they see? Are the planets closer in your world? Can they see planets? Are there more moons? So those are things that will, but if you do it through your character's experience, it makes it stronger. And basically, that's the importance of captivating the world for the story. But is it playing a role within the story or the overall narrative? If you're just describing the world around characters, you're not using or utilizing the narrative or story, because remember, story is how it unfolds, Plot is what needs to happen. And those two things make a narrative. So if your world building is not adding to the story or the plot, by the way, for example, plot might be like, we need to find the druids, right? That's plot 101. We need to find the druids. They have the thing, the MacGuffin, right? But anyway, allow the world building to have story purpose or plot purpose to elevate your narrative instead of just being descriptive. And you do that through character. All right. I will say this, no matter what the rules are, there are no wrong answers. There are only creative ones. So how you want to be creative with that world and designing your world building or anything you do in your story, that's up to you. Just remember the tool or the purpose of it is still the foundation of it. So just because world building needs to function as an element of story or plot, right? That's not limiting you on how you write. The writing is freedom. You have a creative freedom. It's just the rule still applies. So when you're being creative and thinking of anything you want, okay, it could be that you have humanoids. Maybe they are humans from Earth, but it's the year 7,400 and they've developed an empathy with birds. And the birds actually develop, talking birds developed a stronger speaking sense. And people have to talk through their familiar, their bird. That's world building, and it serves story and serves plot. So now you're building on the world instead of like somebody across the universe being like, oh, Earth, they've developed talking birds that people speak through. That's not as interesting because we're not experiencing it. We're just being told about it. So the rule is allow it to flow through the story or plot to increase your narrative. But how you do that creatively could be as amazing as the bird speakers for the empathy connection between humans and birds, right? But one of the most liberating aspects of world building is that there is no wrong answer. You can create whatever you want. And whether you're fashioning a high fantasy realm with mystical creatures or a near future dystopian city, your choices should align with the story and the plot you are telling so the narrative is full. What matters is that every element you do decide to introduce should serve your creative idea to enhance your plot or deepen your story and characters. For example, in a sci-fi setting, if your story revolves around advanced technology, you're focused on the intricacies of that technology and its impact on society, right? Or you should focus, right? But on the other hand, if you're crafting a character-driven drama set in small town, your world building might emphasize the nuances of interpersonal relationships and community dynamics that just happen to be living within and around the futuristic technology. This is prevalent in Star Wars. They don't explain why they're bathing the droids, what they're bathing the droids in. They don't really go into great detail with like the ships and the buttons they're hitting. They're not going into how money works, right? They might say credits, they might say 14 credits, but they're not explaining how do credits work, how do people collect credits, is one credit literally worth one and there's no variation? They're all credits. Like, they don't go into that, but they allow the characters to drive the narrative, and the world around them becomes a part of the story element, the plot element. It's 14 credits, that's plot, okay? But, the catalyst for creativity really comes down to the fact that world building should inspire creativity, not constrain it. It's a playground where you can experiment with unique concepts, challenge social norms, and explore complex themes. As an author, embrace the freedom to shape your world according to your artistic vision and the needs of your narrative. Just like I said with the humanoid element, and they connect with animal empathy and they can speak through the birds, right? Or any animal, maybe the animals in general, tigers, lions, and bears, oh my, all developed speaking because the humans lost it for whatever reason, and evolution led to this unique fixture or whatever, right? It's your world. So you could even take something as simple as cell phones. And what is your unique take on cell phones? Let's get rid of the cell phones. And there's now like a nanotechnology that exists in the air. And they've created the world where you could actually interact with the world by doing a certain movement into the air, and it opens up a port, like an interactive um, not an interactive portal, an interface, right? Because the world, there's nanotech floating around the air, and you can activate it, and it's associated with your blood, right? So there you go. Anyway, in summary, world building is about creating immersive, engaging, and believable fictional worlds. It's a creative endeavor that should be driven by a clear understanding of its purpose within your story. Because remember, there are no wrong answers in world building, only choices that should serve your creative vision and captivate your readers. All right. Crafting seamless world building. Here are 3 essential world building tricks that allow you to immerse readers into your created world without restoring. I'm sorry. Here are 3 essential world building tricks that allow you to immerse readers into your created world without resorting to heavy handed exposition. Yeah, okay. These technologies and techniques will help you. All right, the glasses aren't even working. These techniques will help you seamlessly integrate world building into your narrative, making the experience more engaging and enjoyable for your audience. Trick number 1, show, sometimes tell. Switching it up. That's because show, don't tell isn't accurate. Sometimes you need to tell. It's overtelling that becomes the issue. But as far as world building goes, we're going to change the rule to show, sometimes tell in general, and place it into the world building. One of the most effective world building techniques is show, sometimes tell. Instead of providing readers with lengthy explanations and descriptions of your world, show them the details through the actions, interactions, and observations through your characters. For example, rather than stating, "In this world, magic is forbidden," you could show it by depicting a scene where a character hesitates to use magic, fearing the consequences. By allowing readers to infer the rules and nuances of your world through character behavior, you engage their imagination and make the information feel more organic and integrated. And the reason is because readers love to discover stories. Stories get very boring very quickly when they just feel like they're being told through like a history book. Like if it just seems like very exposition and like, you need to know about this stuff because I know about this stuff. And if I know about this stuff, then it's going to make this character awesome. It's like, no, the character's awesome to you as the writer because you know that stuff, because you developed a character, you explored and grew with that character. So allow your reader to also discover and explore those characters through the worlds. And now they learn something great about their immersive experience, and it's less about telling them exactly what the deal is. But whenever, wherever, please try to utilize your exposition through the character's experience. Trick number 2, use multiple points of views, POVs. Another way to immerse readers in your world is to employ multiple points of views. Hear me out. By presenting your world through the eyes of different characters, each with their own perspectives and experiences, you provide readers with a more comprehensive view of your world. For instance, in a fantasy novel, one character might be well versed in the magic system, while another is a newcomer to the world of spells and incantations. Through these contrasting viewpoints, readers gain insights into the world's complexities without feeling overwhelmed by exposition. because multiple POVs also offer the opportunity to explore various aspects of your world and its impact on different characters' lives. Ultimately, someone who's been using magic for 40 years is going to see it completely different than someone who's just starting. It's like a history teacher teaching history to, fourth graders. They understand the history a little bit. Not saying some students wouldn't understand history in a greater sense, because I know I like to read beyond whatever the school gave me. Oh, God, needed that. All right. Third hint, third tool or trick. Drop hints and clues. This is one of my favorite. I call this seeding. We seed, right? We put the seeds into the ground and we water them through the story. And by the end of the story, we understand what kind of tree it is. So instead of laying out all the world building details up front, strategically sprinkle hints and subtle clues throughout your narrative. Readers enjoy piecing together the puzzles of your world, and it fosters a sense of discovery and engagement. And yes, you're supposed to write for audiences in a way where you expect them. What is it saying? Write as if you're writing to a dumb audience. But in reality, you have to have faith that your audience is smart enough to get it, but you have to write dumb enough for it to make sense. And what that ultimately means is, like, don't force feed all the information to your audience. Let them have some time in using their imagination to add the missing pieces to your descriptions, and also B, allow them to put the pieces together of your narrative, the history of the world, etc. But you don't have to go as complex as using like the most extreme variations of an English lexicon's vocabulary just so you can uh, you know showcase your intellect and be like, I know all these big, solid, strong words, But you shouldn't also write like Idiocracy, the movie, where it's like the big, huge, big truck, the large, big, huge truck. You don't want to do that either. But so when it comes to dropping hints and clues, instead of going, this is the history of the world, blah, 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 allow the characters to explore and discover certain elements of the world in bit pieces, and that means the reader will. I had one of my 10 alpha readers message me about chapter 3, and it takes place in a city, and up to this point everything's really been in a forest, a campsite, whatever, or tribe, I should say, and they were like, how come you should really go into detail with the city? And like, I want to know more about the city. Now, first of all, it's chapter 3, so if you want to know more about the city, keep the pages going, because I assure you, a 53 chapter book is going to teach you a little bit about the city. However, also remember that your character's perspective of the world is important too with world building and dropping hints. If a character grew up in that world their entire life, they're not looking at the city the same way a newcomer would look like. So I know that a character is going to end up in the city, and they know the city differently because they remember it as a child and the city looks completely different. So they're paying attention. Now I get to absorb through that character's experience of the differences and how it affects them emotionally. Whereas the character who grew up there, I mean, how often do you look around your neighborhood and you're really paying attention to it? It becomes almost like a blind mist as you're just driving through your neighborhood, because like, it's just your brain is not absorbing the little tiny details on average. But anyway, but as an example for dropping hints and clues, seeding your world, if your world has a rich history, you could introduce an ancient artifact or a character within a mysterious past, but these elements hint at a depth of your world without providing a full history lesson. As readers encounter these clues, they become more invested in uncovering the secrets and nuances of your world. To simplify that, basically, if you introduce a mysterious character who's using an artifact, you've already started the seeding process. There's a mystical artifact with a crazy, mysterious character. I want to know more about them. chapter 2 or 3. Maybe you go a little bit into like somebody's like there's a chance that's the name the the name you shall not speak, right? Voldemort, right? They slowly but surely built that character up over the course of the 7 books. 8 movies, 7 books, I forget. Over the series, like by the time we meet him and by the time he's defeated, spoiler alert, in the last book of Harry Potter, we know so much about the character. We know about the Thomas character, variation of Voldemort. We understand his relationship with people. We understand, you don't imagine reading the first Harry Potter book and the first 3 chapters is just giving the history of who Voldemort is. It'd be a terrible, terrible book. Anyway, but remember, the key to successful world building is to strike a balance between revealing enough to immerse readers and leaving room for their imagination to fill the gaps. Remember, inform your readers enough, believing that they are smart enough to piece it together. But it's called vague but informative, right? That's another tool. Vague but informative. If you're too vague, you might be writing too smart or too dumb. But you still need to inform the elements. And by the way, when I say dumb, I mean like you're dumbing it down. Not that you're dumb or what you're writing is dumb. I'm using the word dumb as in like too dumbed down. Okay, but you want to vague but informative. So if you're going to be vague, at least give enough information to inform interest. Okay. And these tips and tricks allow you to introduce essential world building elements in a way that enhances your storytelling without overwhelming your audience with exposition. Incorporating these techniques into your writing will not only make your world building more seamless, but also create a more engaging reading experiences because readers will appreciate your ability to transport them into your created world while letting them explore and discover its intricacies alongside your characters. All right. Last bit of world building to help create immersive fictional realities. Okay. Creating a lived in world. All right. This is important. Okay. A lived in world is really a character in itself. You may have 3 or 4 characters or a band of brothers and it's 7 characters, but the world is also a character. It needs to feel lived in. It needs to have life. So here are some of the critical aspects of world building that breathe life into your created universe, making it feel lived in, dynamic, and authentic. Okay? Because crafting a world that extends beyond the protagonist's immediate surroundings is essential for engaging storytelling. Now, before I go any further, I do believe in the rule expose the narrative through story and plot, right? And if you, like, for example, I'm drinking Diet Cherry Pepsi. If I didn't drink Diet Cherry Pepsi as a character and we never see anybody drinking soda, I don't believe you should have to write about soda being in that world. It's not important. It doesn't serve the story. Okay. But what I'm about to go into, just as a pretext to it, okay, just because your protagonist has immediate surroundings doesn't mean that the world is empty. So when the character, your protagonist, is in their immediate surroundings, the world's allowed to interact with that truth. An example might be, and this is a very, very simple example, okay? Your character is a human, and your protagonist is a human, and it's their first time in the wild. Okay, they grew up in a small town away from civilization, basically, and it's filled with humans. They go into the woods, okay, and they run into an elf. Okay, the elf's entire history is not important to your narrative, okay? But how that elf influences the story is. And through that elf, you can explore the history of that elf by their behavior, their positions, their choices, right? For example, if the elf, I'm just trying to make a very simple example. If the elf is sitting around a fire and the protagonist with his two best friends are, walking through the forest, it's getting late, and they see the fire and they explore it, and the elf is like, oh, hello, and it just so happens to be a very friendly meeting. Let's just say there's not a lot of tension, and they're like, they've never seen an elf before, so they're a little curious and cautious. Oh, they might think it's a demon. They might think it's, let's say, you have angels in your world. They might think it's an angel. They might think it's a mystical creature. They might think it's a god. They might think it's a fae. They might think it's a whatever, right? So you get to kind of play with that, because now they get to, oh, sorry, please don't hurt us, don't, I hope we are not infringing on your divine, setting. And they be like, divine setting, right? And they're like, yes, I've only heard stories about the gods. And you think no, I'm an elf. I come from, Salavava, and they're like, Salavava, what's that? And like, that's the capital of the elven civilization. You're an elf? I heard of elves, but I've never seen one in real life, right? And they're like, oh, I heard elves were fantastic, swordsmiths. And the elf takes out maybe a dagger, and they go, yes, this dagger, and they let the person hold the dagger, right? But really great storytelling will make that dagger come back, right? Because either the dagger itself or the knowledge that is being bestowed from that elf that might leave the story will come back to help the subplot or the main plot. But as you can see, I'm using the experience or the naivete of the character to build the living world, but I'm also going to make sure that what I do use and how I use it will influence the narrative. So with that said, as just to reiterate, crafting a world that extends beyond the protagonist's immediate surroundings is essential for engaging storytelling. So, one of the things that you really have to do to create a lived-in world is establish rules and laws. Now, rules and laws can be different in the world in general, but there are also magical rules. There are divine rules. There are life or death rules, right? There are maybe scientific rules, maybe philosophical rules. There are some rules that can't necessarily, they're objective truths, and you have to create those. They could be whatever you want. Like, gravity could not be a thing in your world. You could indeed have your people live on a flat earth or a flat planet. Like, you could, like, nothing's saying you can't do that, right? But you have to establish those rules. You might not have to go deep into it, but as long as you know they exist, you'll be able to tell your story and allow that information to influence your narrative. So you need to establish the rules and laws in your head, and then you could filter those ideas through your story and plot as needed. Because every world, whether real or fictional, operates under a set of rules and laws. Okay? Your fictional world should be no different. And this is why you have to define not just governing principles that shape how society functions, but you also have to think beyond that. Three rules can encompass these examples: legal, ethical, or even magical systems, depending on the nature of your world. So you have to think of all the elements beyond just like, if you do that, you go to jail. Oh, that's going to be a fine. Like, those are laws, and you should have those. Those are cultural or societal. Some cultures have very specific laws based on their religion or their upbringing, and then some societies have very strict laws, and then you have what's known as unspoken contracts, right? The silent contracts, which is, you don't hurt me, I won't hurt you. That's why no one goes around and kills each other, right? But anyway, for instance, in a dystopian society, oppression laws might restrict citizens' freedoms. While in a magical realm, the rules of spellcasting could be central to the world's structure. Okay? 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 All right. Number 2. Inhabitants and independent existences. So this is sort of like what I was saying with the elves and the humans and blah, blah, blah. By the way, you don't have to have elves or humans in your world. I don't have humans. Uh, I have they're called Humerians or Humera, but I call them the Humerians, which is basically the closest you'll get to a human. To create a convincing world, your characters should not be isolated figures in a vacuum. The inhabitants of your world must have their own lives, motivations, and stories that exist independently of the protagonists. This adds depth and realism to your narrative. Develop secondary characters with their own desires, conflicts, and arcs. Consider how these characters interact with one another in the larger world. So if you did have elves, they would have their own society, their own rules, their own laws, their own understandings of certain things. They might even have their own touch of magic that maybe humans don't. But in my world, I have the Velis, the High Velis. The High Velis have a different name, but just for simplicity, there's the Velis and the High Velis. I have the Orbics, I have the Akids, I have the Hamerans, I have the Voleri, which are elves basically. Um, you know, I have I have creatures that basically look like angels, but they're not called angels, and creatures that look like demons, but they're not called demons. But they're like humanoids. They're just really powerful, and they use that to their advantage to influence divine control over people, right? So you. Oh, and I don't know if I have minotaurs. Like my minotaurs have like a very sophisticated society. They're not just like beasts that you find in a in a maze or something. Anyway, so think about that. Like like I have all those those species. They're not races; they're species because Valis are definitely not Humerians. They're a different species, but they're humanoid species. But they all have different languages. They all have different cultures. They all have different societies. They have all different laws. The Valis have laws above society, but the Valis also rule. They're the ruling class of society because they're the majority of the world. So the majority of the world is the cities are mostly ran by Valis. So they have rules for society, but they have rules amongst the Valis themselves. Okay. Anyway, so you also want to think of governing systems. Every society has a governing system, whether it's a monarchy, a democracy, a theocracy, or something entirely unique to your world. You can make of anything. Trust me. You know, whoever raises the most beautiful frog becomes the leader. You know, it could be whatever you want. Or they place a frog on a table between two people, and whoever the frog jumps to is the innocent one. Right? Like it could be that crazy. I almost kind of want to do that now. So you want to determine who is in charge and how power is distributed. You also want to explore the political structures and hierarchies and conflicts that shape your world. These systems can be integral to your plot, generating tension and driven character motivations. In my world, I do have a majority of those styles. I do have kings and queens, but I also have history blocks, like chunks of history, right? Cycles. And within those cycles, there are different ruling classes or different, governing rules. And kings and queens don't last beyond a certain point. They are not a thing. Um, so you have to say to yourself too, like how long does your world expand to, and your novels have, are you all in the same time period around, or like you have to think of your world, especially in the sense of your narrative, like how does it help your narrative if I say, all right, 100 years later these things are changed or different, right? Because if you look at our world, every if you go back every 1,000 years, the world is so different, right? So, but anyway, you might even have rules for magic systems, because if magic exists in your world, even divine magic, you have to establish clear rules for its use. You have to define who can wield magic, how it's learned, and what its limitations are. The magic system should be consistent and logical within your context of your world. Whether it's wand waving wizards or elemental sorcery, magic can be captivating elements of your world building. However, you still need rules. Soft magic or hard magic still have rules. It's just we might not outrightly learn all the rules in a soft magic system, but you as the writer should know the limitations and all the other things of your soft magic system. Now, setting boundaries is also important. Boundaries and limitations are essential for creating a world that functions realistically. If gravity is a thing, so in Brandon Sanderson's Way of Kings, they have these storm, whatever the gems, they could absorb the storm, Stormfather. And it gives them powers to jump higher than other people. So they're basically defying gravity. They're stronger, they're quicker, they're faster, right? So they take, but there is a fundamental foundation to the physics of the world. So if you don't have these storm gems, whatever, I can't remember what they're called, but if you're not using the Stormfather power, you're limited to the physics of the real world, or the Way of King's real world. But you can manipulate it if you have this storm power. And these constraints are important because they can be physical, they can be geographic, they can be society, they can be class divisions, they could be powers and magic, they could be, in my world, everyone can talk to the gods through prayer, but not all people can talk to the gods, because gods are very involved in my world. They're like, they're like the Greek gods, where they're just like to mess with everybody. But you could see a god walking around, depending on where you are, of course. You can see them walking around and you can interact with them. Sometimes, it's not everywhere, but anyway, environmental descriptions are also important. Okay, these are just to keep you in the loop. These are things to use to create lived-in worlds. All right, so a well-described environment is crucial for immersing readers in your world. You have to paint a vivid picture of the landscape, the climates, and the natural features that make your world unique. The environment can influence the way characters live, the resources they have, and the challenges they face. Again, with Way of Kings, they have these crazy storms. In Game of Thrones, winter is coming, right? So that affects their way they behave. And of course, culture. The last one is culture, language, and history. To make your world feel authentic, define its culture, language, and history. Explore the customs, the traditions, and belief systems of inhabitants. Develop languages, dialect, or unique terminology to reflect the diversity within your world. Delve into the history of your world to uncover significant events, conflicts, and historical figures that have shaped its current state. Because creating a lived-in world involves meticulous attention to detail and comprehensive understanding of the various elements that constitute your fictional universe. By defining rules, creating independent characters, establishing governing systems, and embracing the complexities of culture and history, you will breathe life into your world and make it a character all its own. Final thoughts. Crafting a rich and immersive fictional world is a monumental task. Trust me. Writing is not easy, but it's damn fun. But it's also, you have to understand, creating a rich, immersive fictional world is also one of the most rewarding aspects of storytelling, especially as you see it come to life. So, things that you have to remember as an author, just to kind of remember to have that hidden world behind the pages. So whatever you create doesn't have to be on the pages, but it should influence the pages. Just because you have, I have Dreyu, right? Those are basically druids in my world. I have Dreyus. They're a little bit different because obviously I wanted to put my own spin on them. But if the Dreyus are not in my world, and I know the entire history of the Dreyu, and that they come from, they actually are the first people that were in the region of Gorsed, and, the way they developed, how they became more underground people, and, their nature, they worship certain elements of nature. None of that's important. However, if somebody is in a city or a town or an area where the Dreyu are prevalent, but they hide away from society and people, there would still be elements that influence that area. Say markings on a tree, and someone could be like, we have to get out of here. This is Dreyu territory. Now, I don't have to go into great detail, but the way the characters are reacting to that are telling us that the Dreyu might be dangerous. Why? Who knows? It doesn't have to be a narrative element, but we are dictating movement from the characters to leave that area to go somewhere else. Okay. You also want to invite readers to dream a little bit of your world, because world building invites everybody to imagine this vast universe you create. And when you craft the world with meticulous details and profound complexities, you create a space where readers can lose themselves. All right. And world building should be motivating. The thing is, like, if you're in your head and you're like, I got to spend months and months and months, if not years, developing a world, don't do that. Start with your story and allow your story to build on the world you need to tell your story, your narrative. And as you start telling your narrative, you might start thinking about those things and it'll naturally build. But if you focus on world building before you write, or before you start brainstorming or working on a story or having a strong narrative, because you don't know, that narrative might create a better, more interesting element to your world building. And it'll get you writing, it'll get you going, it'll get you started, and you won't you got to motivate yourself and think of things that are you want to play with, ideas. And you could also work with ideas that exist, just put your spin on it. Obviously you don't want to create the One Ring, and you don't want to create 7 rings to the humans, 3 to the elves, 5 to the dwarves. Like, you don't want to do that, but you can have rings that are magical. It's okay. You can have a volcano, like, it's all right. Anyway, and the world beyond the novel, you have to remember that your created world is not limited to a single novel. It has the potential to transcend your current story and inspire future works. As you delve into its intricacies, consider the untold stories, the unexplored regions, and the undiscovered characters that may inhabit that world. I do this. So I'm working on a 12 novel saga for the Maven Wars. But within that Maven Wars, I have characters, and I have already started outlining the sub stories. There might be one-offs or whatever the case, or maybe even like 4-book series for that character. But also I have characters that live beyond those worlds. So I have a story, the story saga called 21-3. That's a saga. It's another one, but it takes place way in the future in my world. Not like spaceships and stuff, but like feels more modern, like there's buildings and there's like, vehicles and stuff. Whereas my world takes place in the stereotypical fantasy world of horses and wagons. The Maven Wars does. Anyway, so my final words to you is really to embrace the challenge. World building is not a task to be feared, but a challenge to embrace. It is the cornerstone of unforgettable storytelling, and it's a journey that takes time and effort. So whether you're embarking on your first world building adventure or refining your craft as an experienced author, remember that your dedication to your world will shine through in your story, because world building is the alchemy that transforms words into living, breathing universes. It's the magic that captivates readers, inviting them to step into your world and experience the extraordinary. As you tackle the complex task of world building, may you find inspiration in the infinite possibilities, and may your creativity know no bounds. Whew. Next in this video series. The next video in this series will focus on complete sentences. We'll discuss what complete sentences are made of, why they're essential for strong prose, and how you can maintain your unique voice while adhering to or breaking the rules of sentence structure. Question: what's your favorite fictional world from a novel, and what makes it so captivating to you as a reader? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, if you liked what you watched, or you've been watching for quite some time and just haven't done so already, please subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon so you don't miss out. That's it. All right. As always, keep developing the right mindset. I'll see you next time. Bye.